Welcome back everyone to the Bitcoin Business Bureau. I'm your host as always, LitecoinLeader. Today I'm back at the whiteboard. I'm working on the second version of explaining how assets can be borrowed against. The first example, which I will put up in this corner right here, and I know I'm off to the side because I'm emphasizing the whiteboard today, so just deal with the whiteboard, and we're going to go back to, this is the finished point of the last lesson, which I'm going to post up here, of borrowing against assets in the form of real estate. Most people know that because that's the traditional way that people typically borrow from banks, is with real estate. So now I'm going to do something, and I'm going to change this. So again, this is not financial advice, so we're going to emphasize this again. So get the marker open. Not financial advice. Now, the example I had before is a real estate investor who owns two houses at $100,000 each. I am now going to name the houses Bitcoin 1 or BTC 1 and BTC 2. Okay? That's all I've changed. This is now essentially, instead of two houses, I have two Bitcoin. Okay? For simplistic purposes, the Bitcoins are still worth $100,000 each. Okay? So far, the example is the same. I have these assets, and I say, you know what? I've got these assets. I want to be conservative. I only want to borrow against one of them. I want to put one Bitcoin as collateral to go get a loan, much like I would have used one house to go get a mortgage. So now one house becomes one Bitcoin worth $100,000. Instead of a loan, well, it will be a loan, but it's not a mortgage. It's just going to be a loan. It's just going to be an asset. The mortgage for real estate, the term mortgage is for an asset backing loan. The asset behind the loan is the house. This is going to be an asset backed loan against Bitcoin. So I'm just going to use a generic term instead of a mortgage. So an asset backed loan. All right, I just renamed it. It's a similar product. It's an asset as collateral that you can borrow against. Now, instead of going to bank XYZ like in the last example, I'm going to a site like NEXO, which as soon as you deposit an asset like Bitcoin or Ethereum, they give instantly a 50% credit line. So now I don't even need to apply. I just have to put the asset there, and I don't need to, no one needs to go and do an appraisal of the Bitcoin. We know how much it's worth. We don't need to do the appraisal of Ethereum. As soon as you put we have a market value already established, unlike in real estate, because if you go and try to say, I'm going to borrow against my house, the bank says, how much is it worth? And they have to go evaluate it. That doesn't need to happen in this example because Bitcoin already has a value. In this example, we're still using $100,000. So I deposit $100,000 worth of Bitcoin into NEXO. As soon as I do that, I get $50,000 credit line immediately, right? And so this is now a credit line rather than a loan. So this is I'm going to set, and it's asset backed. So I have a credit line. Trying to be as legible as I can from off to the side. So I have a credit line for 50%. Remember the example earlier of the mortgage is I was going to borrow at a loan to value of 50%. So this is the same loan to value. I have a loan, I can borrow up to $50,000 and take that $50,000 and move it right back into my asset column because I will borrow it in the form of USDC instead of dollars. So it'll be a crypto version. It'll be USDC instead of dollars, but still worth $50,000. And my loan to value is still 50 over 100 because I have $50,000 worth of USDC and I have $100,000 of an asset. My loan is $50,000. $50,000 of a loan, even though it's a credit line. I've used it all. And I'm going to have an asset worth 100. So 50 over 100 means my loan to value, if I pull all my credit line out, is 50%. Now the benefit here is that I put this USDC into the asset, and now my loan to value gets improved based on NEXO. Or I can turn this. I can do one other thing, and this is the simplest thing to think about. This is I can actually turn this into a half of a Bitcoin. because the original Bitcoin is 100K. Now I have 50K, so I could have, when I'm complete, I could have 1.5 Bitcoins here. Let me explain the steps one last time here. I have 100,000. I deposit it on NEXO. They give me instantly an asset-backed, the ability to make an asset-backed loan by hitting the borrow button, because they give me a credit line for 50% of the value of Bitcoin. I hit the borrow button. I get USDC. I can then buy the Bitcoin with that USDC, so that at the end of the day, I wind up with 1.5 Bitcoin instead of 1. My loan is a half of a Bitcoin, or 50,000. So my loan to value is now, instead of 50 over 100, is now 50 over 150. And it drops to 33%. So that's how you can control more Bitcoin by using a site like NEXO, and you can actually use the Bitcoin to buy more Bitcoin, because you have, Bitcoin becomes an asset-backed, an asset to borrow against to buy more of another asset. So this is another example of how you can use NEXO to your advantage. So now I've taken the asset and I use the asset, establish the credit line, take the credit line, borrow the full amount, and buy more Bitcoin with it, and now I have more of the original asset. So this is just another example of the power of NEXO. I'll be talking about other topics with NEXO and how the payments get made, and I will also talk. Well, let's wrap it up with that one right here. This, just to complete the thought. Since I answered every other number here, this is a question I get a lot. How do I make this payment? Originally, I had a $50,000 mortgage and I had to pay $250 a month. Well, the payments are a little bit higher. Let's just say it's, I don't know, let's say it's $500 a month, right? And you're like, whoa, how can I get $500 a month? Where's that money coming from? Well, the $500 a month, which is actually paid on a daily basis of about, I would guess about, between 10 and 15 bucks a day, maybe a little more, maybe 16. And that gets paid from your credit line. So let's go back to one last time looking at your credit line. Your original credit line was 50% of the asset you originally had. But we don't have 1 Bitcoin anymore. We have 1.5. So our credit line went from 50,000. This now becomes 75 because it's 50. So I will leave that 50 there. Let's put that there. But we're going to slash it because we just changed everything, because now your credit line goes up because it's always 50% of whatever your assets are. So now my credit line increases to 75K. Right? That I've increased it to $75,000 of a credit line because I have 1.5 Bitcoin, which is worth $150,000 because the Bitcoin is, or for this example, is staying at worth $100,000 each. So now, at the end of the day, I have 1.5 Bitcoin. I have a 33% loan to value because I have a loan of $50,000, but how do I pay it? Well, my credit line increased to $75,000. I've only used $50,000 of it to borrow against. So that extra $25,000 of credit line, that will be paying that $500 a month. That's how the loan will get paid. So that's the end of the second video here on borrowing against assets. Did you understand everything I did? I took an asset, I have a credit line. I don't want to draw too much or getting complicated, but I took an asset. I now have an asset-backed loan. I get the amount, I turn it into Bitcoin, and my credit line goes up, which pays for my payment. That's how it works. And my loan to value is actually a much reasonable number. We will talk about this, and we'll come back to the payments again in the third episode. If you have questions, leave comments below, like and subscribe. Stay tuned for the third episode. So with all that said, I'm going to close the door on the bureau, say follow leader one more time, and I'll talk to you in the next episode. Take care.